The average life expectancy in the Middle Ages was just 30 years old. It is the single most famous and most misunderstood statistic in all of history. It paints a grim picture of a world where everyone was old at 25 and on death's door by 35. But what if I told you this number is a statistical lie? A mathematical illusion that has distorted our entire understanding of the past. In this video, we will unravel the truth behind medieval life expectancy. We'll discover why that number is so misleading, what your real chances of survival were, and how long you could actually expect to live if you were lucky enough to survive the most dangerous period of your life being a child. Part 1. The Tyranny of the Average. So let's confront that number head-on: 30 years. Where does it come from, and why is it so deceptive? The answer lies in the cold, hard logic of a mathematical average. An average is calculated by adding up all the data points and dividing by the number of data points. And in the Middle Ages, one data point skewed the entire calculation into oblivion, infant, and child mortality. We cannot comprehend how dangerous it was to be a child in the medieval world. Childbirth itself was a life-threatening event for both mother and baby, taking place in unhygienic conditions without any understanding of germs. If the baby survived birth, a host of dangers awaited. Diseases that are now trivial, thanks to vaccines like measles, mumps, and whooping cough, were potential death sentences for a young child. Malnutrition was rampant, weakening their immune systems. A simple childhood fever could be fatal. The statistics are staggering. Historians and archaeologists estimate that roughly 25% of all infants died before their first birthday, and up to 50%, fully half of all children born, would die before the age of 10. Now think about what that does to a mathematical average. For every person who lives to be a venerable 60, you have another who died at age 1, another who died at age 5, and another who died at age 10. When you add up all those lifespans and divide, the result is a deceptively low number like 30 or 35. That number doesn't tell you the typical lifespan. It tells you that surviving childhood was like winning a brutal lottery. Part 2. The Great Filter. The best way to think of medieval life expectancy is not as a single number, but as a two-stage process. The first stage is surviving the Great Filter of childhood. If you could pass through this filter, your entire future changed. Let's put this in practical terms. If you were a peasant who managed to reach your 21st birthday, your life expectancy was not a mere 9 more years. It jumped dramatically. A 21-year-old in the Middle Ages could reasonably expect to live to the age of 50, and living into your 60s was not at all uncommon. You had already proven you were a survivor. Your body had weathered the diseases and hardships of youth. You had made it. History is filled with examples of people who lived long, full lives, completely defying the 30-year myth. Eleanor of Aquitaine, one of the most powerful women of the High Middle Ages, lived to the age of 82. The great knight William Marshall, a man who fought in countless battles, died in his bed at 72. The Venetian Doge Enrico Dandolo was still leading armies in his 90s. While these are elites, the same statistical reality applied to the common man survived the filter, and a long life was possible. Part 3. The New Dangers of Adulthood. Of course, surviving childhood didn't mean life was safe. It just meant you graduated to a new set of dangers. The threats simply changed form. For men, the risks were often violent or occupational. If you were a peasant, a farming accident could be fatal. If you were a craftsman, you worked with dangerous tools in unregulated conditions. And if you were a knight, there was the ever-present risk of war feuds and tournaments. While battle deaths were less common than we think, they were still a constant threat. For women, the single greatest danger was childbirth. A woman might have survived the diseases of her own childhood, only to die giving birth to her own children. With no understanding of hygiene, postpartum infections, or puerperal fever, were rampant killers. A woman who had 6 or 7 children was rolling the dice with her life 6 or 7 times. And for everyone, there was the constant background threat of famine from crop failures and the ever-present risk of disease. The Black Death was the ultimate cataclysm. But even in normal times, outbreaks of dysentery, influenza, and smallpox could sweep through a village or town with devastating effect. Life was a constant struggle. But even with all these dangers, the idea that the world was populated only by the young is a fantasy. So what is the definitive proof? What do the dead themselves tell us? Art. 4. The 2 peaks of death. This is where science gives us the clearest picture. The field of paleopathology is the study of disease and death in ancient populations, primarily through the analysis of skeletal remains. And when paleopathologists excavate medieval cemeteries, they discover a fascinating and consistent pattern. They do not find that everyone died around the age of 30. Instead, they find what is called a bimodal mortality curve. This means there are 2 distinct peaks in the age of death. The first peak is massive. It is composed of the skeletons of infants and young children from age 0 to 10. This is the tragic physical evidence of the devastatingly high child mortality rate we discussed. It's the great filter written in bone. But then after this initial peak, the death rate drops significantly for the teenage and young adult years. And then we see the second peak begin to rise. This second peak is for people in their 50s, 60s, and even 70s. This is the definitive proof. This skeletal evidence shows us in stark terms the 2-stage reality of medieval life. If you died, you were most likely to die either very, very young, or if you were lucky, quite old. The average age of 30 was for most adults a meaningless number. They didn't see themselves as old in their late 20s. A person was considered to have reached old age around 60. They were not rare. They were a normal and respected part of the community, the keepers of wisdom and experience. So the myth of the 30-year lifespan is just that, a myth. It is a statistical ghost created by the heartbreaking tragedy of infant mortality. It has painted a false picture of the medieval world, a world we imagine to be populated only by the very young, living short, brutish lives. The reality was far more complex and far more human. It was a world of profound risk, but also of profound resilience. The true battle of medieval life was not surviving to 30, it was surviving to 10. If you could win that fight, you had a good chance of seeing your grandchildren. Debunking this myth is crucial because it allows us to see the people of the Middle Ages not as a strange, short-lived other, but as people much like ourselves, hoping for a long and full life for themselves and their children. This journey to replace popular myths with historical truth is our core mission. If you appreciate this kind of deep dive, show your support for our channel by hitting the like button. And if you want to continue debunking the lies we've been told about the past, subscribe to our channel and ring the notification bell. Because the truth of history is rarely found in a single simple number. It's found in the complex, messy, and resilient stories of the people who lived it.